everyone, this is Paris ASMR. I hope you're fine. I hope that you've had a good week. And I'm very happy to find you because today we're going to do something a little bit different. We will draw and tell a story. I hope it will relax you and help you fall asleep. If you want to have a look to the French version of this story, you can find it on the channel of Verseau, who is a French ASMR'tist. You will find the link in the description. Pour les Français, mais aussi pour les curieux, vous pourrez trouver la version française de cette version, de cette histoire, sur la chaîne du Verseau. Le lien est dans la description. Je vous souhaite un très beau voyage. Once upon a time, there was a pretty little house built in the middle of the mountains, where there lived a charitable and loving man, along with his sweet wife and the little girl of 10 years called Elodie. The child was like a sweet candy, radiant from morning to night, always smiling from ear to ear and playful in mischievousness. Her parents were filled with happiness since her birth, not a whim, not a lie. Elodie could not have made them more joyful. One wintry day in December, on the eve of Christmas, when the parents had gone to town, the child watched the airborne dance of the falling snowflakes as they twirled with delicate grace, reflecting the deep blues of the twilight. A cottony blanket of snow-covered mountains, as if wrapping them up warm in a scene straight out of a Christmas greetings card. The wind gently ruffled the majestic thorns of the big fir trees, enchanting Elodie, who was mesmerized by the bewitching landscape, dreaming of the 1,000 cabrioles that she could make there on the return of her parents. As she cozied up in Papa's rocking chair, huddled in her winter wool, she slowly felt her eyes lose themselves to the peaceful beauty of nature. Her eyelids seemed to dwell on themselves, her face lit by the slight flicker of the cracking chimney fire. Elodie closed her eyes to the contenting sound of its rumbles and homely smell of burning pine wood. A little tickle, a tiny tickle on her nose, like a snowdrop, woke her up a few hours later. Elodie yawned to the grass, fully rested. She became startled as a firefly flew from the tip of her nose into the air. Elodie gave her a friendly smile. "Do not go. I did not want to scare you," she confided. The firefly seemed to understand her. At first hesitant, then finally confident, she came to rest on the girl's shoulder, looked at her gently. As she approached a little, Elodie noticed that the tiny bill seemed to lose luminosity from second to second. Perhaps he was hungry. Elodie left the rocking chair to go to the kitchen, remembering her mom had made a jar of jam yesterday. Normally, this spot was reserved for her, but she decided to share it with a new friend. Nobody will find out. Standing on tiptoes, she managed to grab the jar and open it with her little hands. She scooped out a small piece of the sugary nectar with a finger and then brought it to the firefly. The sweetened mixture had its effect immediately, lighting up this magical beetle with 1,000 Christmas lights as the jam disappeared from her index finger. Once he had finished, he shared his gratitude with his newfound angel. Thank you very much. I owe you my life and the one of my children. Come with me, I know how to prove my gratitude." Naturally startled, Elodie raised her eyebrows. An insect that speaks, this surely is not real. The newly recharged firefly was already flying towards the front door, as if asking to be followed outside. Hesitant, Elodie approached the window again, her eyes sleepy. The limes of the night were already making their way between the high mountains. The night was beginning to draw in. The rabbits cocooned themselves in their snug burrows. The beautiful birds flew to the nests, silhouetted against the shimmering white backdrop of the mountains, and the soft footprints of wise foxes began to fade by another layer of powdery snow. Were Mum and Dad? Elodie suddenly thought. She tried to hold back a sad sigh in vain. If they lingered in the village, she would not have time to enjoy the winter wonderland tonight. Her eyes stared at her moon boots and coat, slightly lit by the firefly who was waiting like a luminous hovering lamp, allowing her mischievous side to take over. Enticed by the firefly's invitation, Elodie picked up her boots and coat and opened the front door. An icy blast hit her face as she pushed the door against the drifted snow. She closed her eyelids and stepped outside, but the cold did not make her grimace. On the contrary, it was an invigorating, refreshing contrast to the snugness of indoors. The firefly followed her out with his guiding, reassuring flicker, landing on Elodie's large mittens. Elodie advanced through the cottony expanse, her footsteps sinking into that pretty white cushion. The quiet of the forest was reassuring, the frozen stream shimmering under the light of the firefly. Everything was magic. You can call me Ludivine if you want, and let us set out, announced the tiny insect, sparkling at the idea of presenting its countries. Without thinking, the little girl began to follow her. The wind was soft, like thousands of silk leaves, caressing her pink cheekbones. Nature slept peacefully as they walked along the sparse path of powder, making fresh footprints. Small jerks on the side attracted the attention of the child. Ludivine, will you kindly enlighten me, please? She asked, leaning over. Her friend came to help her, and together they discovered a young sparrow, the paw caught in what seemed to be a mound of roots. Carefully, Elodie removed him from his prison. The poor bird was shivering, but what was she going to do with it? As if she could sense her pondering, the firefly replied, "Keep him warm against you. The place where we are going is a place where he can sleep." Intrigued, the little girl obeyed as she continued to follow her friendly guide, holding the bed under her coat, shielding him from the elements, gently soothing him with reassuring words. The minutes transformed into hours without Elodie really noticing the time passing, who was dazzled by the garlands of rose and the beds of snow capers, these beautiful pearly flowers. The bird woke softly, even uttering a soft chirp. Elodie caressed the tip of his beak, the top of the downy head, and his pretty feathers. To look at it, his grey and bluish colors reminded her of a kind of bird that Papa had shown her one day. It is undoubtedly a chick sparrow. So preoccupied by her new veterinary role, Elodie had not noticed that they had arrived at the destination. In front of them stood a soft wooden fence with a welcoming door which was wide open. Ludivine flew through it, illuminating the pathway for Elodie, who closely followed. At the back were several small huts, glowing from the insides, and on the sides, bordering the path leading to it, were pretty boxes, decorated with lanterns. The child entered the nearest hut at the request of a friend and was greeted by a wonderful multicolored spectacle. Ramages and plumages from all sides. It was the house of the birds. Alerted to the sounds of the chirping, the chicken sparrow awoke for good, and with a hesitant wing, he flew to his fellows, not without a cheerful thank you chirp for Elodie. She waved him bon voyage, smiling about her good deed. Preceded by Ludivine, she explored further, passing between peacocks, herons, green peaks, hawks, partridges, turtle doves, ibis, and 1,000 other eagles and owls. With regret, she left this first little house to enter the second, which could not have been more different. It was occupied by large stags with giant antlers. She timidly approached one of them. So small was she, and so giant was the stag, maybe 3 times bigger. She wondered if he would even see her. Yet, as soon as he caught sight of her, he leaned his big muzzle towards her. He blinked his kind eyes, as if to reassure her she need not to be afraid. Drawn to the warmth of the air emanating from his nostrils, she placed a calming hand on his nose and slowly blinked back. All of a sudden, the stag looked distracted. Elodie noticed his glance to a bag of carrots behind her. This gentle giant was clearly hungry. Enjoying her new mother hen roll, Elodie seized one of the carrots and brought it to the animal, which thanked her with a satisfied rattle. It was then that she saw the envious glance of her companions. Smiling, she went back to get the bag and started to hand out the remaining carrots to the others in the stable, much to the amusement and slight frustration of Ludivine, who was patiently hovering near the door. "Are you finished? We're waiting," murmured Ludivine soon. Elodie nodded and, after a last caress, went back to the cabinet. She knocked 3 times at the door, as she had been taught, and waited patiently. A benevolent old woman opened the door, almost as if she were already aware of her arrival. Ludivine landed on the girl's shoulder, eager to enter this warm cottage, with its welcoming scents of delicious sweet perfumes. A bowl of air raised the truffle on his arrival, and snorted before coming to greet her. One could read on his necklace the name of Merci. The tired child tickled his chest, caressing his ivory and caramel-colored coat. Then the grandmother picked him up and took the bundle of joy to the large armchair, which was covered with a thick shawl, as she gestured to Elodie take a seat opposite. The sounds of the crackling log fire was momentarily interrupted by a short elf-looking fellow who entered the room with a hot cup of cocoa and a few slices of gingerbread. He shuffled the books on the side table next to Elodie to create a space for her refreshments. "Enjoy," he said, in an authoritative but paternal way. The old woman seemed very moved by this exchange. She smiled, then picked up her knitting needles and resumed work on a bright red design, as if the girl's presence was normal. Elodie contemplated her agile hands as they rhythmically threaded the red cotton. What could she be knitting? Her gaze left the gentle grandmother for a moment to observe a door that had just been opened. An old man with a beard came in. His cheekbones shrugged as he smiled at the child. "Did you have a good trip?" he asked in a quiet voice. The grateful girl nodded and watched him silently as he took wood in his arms to furnish the fireplace. Elodie followed his methodical gestures. The logs were skillfully stacked in the den. Then he added a few branches and finally cracked a match. A fire in shimmering colors gently dawned. The man remained by his side with his poker, stirred the incandescent coals with caution. Ludivine had fallen asleep on her shoulder. Lassie was sleeping clenched in her basket. Only the crackling of the chimney murmured in the peaceful living room. The old lady appeared to finish her knitting, stretched and handed her work to her husband, happy with the result. He walked towards Elodie, who was starting to yawn, and put his gift on her head. The child saw a white pumpkin slipping on her nose. The man then adjusted her little hat and walked away to contemplate the picture, as delighted as his wife. "It suits you very well," they said. The little girl smiled at them in the mists of sleep. She had scarcely time to realize that the hat she wore was the same as that of her two hosts. Her eyelids fell slowly. The warmth of the fire hugged her gently and caressed her back, as Mom sometimes does. And then the air, as Papa sometimes does. It was as if they were there. Then Elodie half opened her eyes. Leaning over her were her parents, smiling. She sat up on a rocking chair. The night was just beginning to fall outside. Had she dreamed? "We did not want to wake you up, sweetheart. You can go back to sleep." Well, where did this red cap come